CAPSI podcast series. CAPSI, building a culture of effective giving and corporate social responsibility.
Welcome to another series of our conversations on African philanthropy. With me, Bhekinkosi Moyo, the Director of the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment. Today we are joined by Dr. Emmanuel Taban, who is popularly known as a pulmonologist, but he has also served in several portfolios in his employment history. I think we're going to go through that, but just briefly, he has served as a pulmonologist in private practice from 2018 up to now in midstream. He has also been a specialist physician. He has also worked as a medical registrar in the Gauteng Department of Health. He has been a general practitioner, and I've also read that he keeps on studying and improving. Taban, welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Moyo.
Thank you very much for joining us. Have you stopped running?
Unfortunately not. Life is a journey,
Yeah.
but you cannot choose your journey, whether you can run or you can walk. At this moment, I'm at 44. I think I still need to run. I still got the energy. Once I'm 65, then I can start walking.
And I suppose the running here is symbolic in many ways,
Yes.
because I read, and you have said this in your book, that when you were a child, you would run all the time. Whether you are sent to the shops, you would keep running. And if you did not run, you are not so sure that you will be here today. Maybe let's talk a bit about the symbolism of running.
I think running for me does not mean physical running. For me, running is equate to management of my time. The slower I go, the slower things happen in my life. The faster I run, the quicker I get certain results. So for me, running is more significant achievement. And throughout my life, I've learned that our time on earth is extremely very short. And if you wasted it walking slowly, chances are good that we miss an opportunity in life that we regret when we reach our retirement age. So I feel like, I think for me as a young person, age of 44, I'm in mid of my height of my success, and I need to maximize my opportunity by actually increase my speed. How do I actually look at things?
And at the height of COVID, many people went a very traditional route. So I would say scientists went a traditional route, and you decided to run in a different, what somebody would say, an orthodox way. And in that running, you actually came up with solutions for your patients. And I think that's something that when I read and I watched some of the episodes that have been done on your life, it was quite telling that at times you don't have to follow what everyone is saying or doing at the time, but you have to follow your passion, you have to follow your own gift. And I think we should maybe talk a bit about that moment when you decided you were going to look at this COVID pandemic and find a solution from the South. Because more often we are expecting solutions to come from the West, but the West is also looking at us as the overseas, and that's how you put it somewhere, that literature can be developed anywhere. And normally people say we are waiting for literature from overseas. The Europeans, the British, look at us here in the South as overseas, and you did that. So maybe we can talk a bit about that moment in your life.
There's one principle about success. Success has no location, has no time, but has one basic principle, which is mastering your basics. When you master your basics, your brain automatically look at the difficulties beyond basics. And when COVID-19 came, I was just like any other pulmonologist around the world, but the difference was that I did master my basics. So when I encounter problems, I could think on the better position, not on the basic level. And that what perhaps helped me to see that after I did all my basics right, my patients were not improving. So perhaps something was not right with my patient. And hence that's what drive me. I want to do something different that maybe can give me answers why my patients were not doing well. And that's when I did the bronchoscopy. Yes, though the World Health Organization advised against it because of the risk of spreading the infection to the doctors and also to the nursing staff and to the units. And that was the fear. And I just thought that fear was really unfounded. And when we did our first bronchoscopy, yes, it's real different results. But remember, when I did the bronchoscopy, I was not looking for mucus plugs. I was looking for lung fibrosis based on the Western literature. And mucus plug was something that I found by the way. So sometime in our journey, you have to have purpose. But sometimes you just take a journey and it might turn out completely differently. So you have to be prepared for your finding. And I think for me, that's what taught me that particular moment.
And that takes me to one statement that I think you have said in the past, that the past must never determine your future, but your future is already written. And in many ways, I think your life story is an epic one. How did your life story growing up as a young boy in South Sudan prepare you for that moment when you had to deal with dozens and dozens of patients that were coming to you almost for that one last moment for them breathing?
I think my life in South Sudan, of course, when I grew up in South Sudan, like anybody else, wherever you grow, no matter the degree of poverty, you get to accept everything around you because of your surrounding. So you can't learn helplessness. Means conditions around you, they are normal for you because everybody accepted their conditions. And of course, when I left South Sudan under unusual circumstances and found myself in South Africa in different kind of environment, I get to see things a lot different. And I remember first when I arrived in South Africa in 1995, of course, I did spend time as a street child in Joburg, and I got help by missionaries. And one thing always bothers me, and I used to be a very good Christian, by the way, and one of the things that bothers me, of course, when you look at the poverty levels, the face of poverty was black, but the face of success was white.
Yeah.
So, and if you go to church, black and white all goes to church. And that's really bothered me a lot. So my point was, what was really God doing? Or are we not praying enough because black people pray the most? And I have to, at that time, something come to my mind. What if I spend enough time learning, studying, and become the best in what I do? What will happen to me and my surrounding? And that's what actually drive me. And of course, remember back to South Sudan. In the past, I thought maybe God hated people in South Sudan because, number one, we are very dark in complexions. We are different from the rest of the world. And our place seemed like unfertile, with no prospect, with no resources. So you look at it saying, but what is God doing? But after all this traveling, after where I found myself, I had seen South Sudan completely differently in terms of the resources, in terms of opportunity. And in fact, I finally get to see the light that actually God has done his best to give us the best country in the world. So do the rest of the Africa. Africa is a beautiful continent with endless resources. So the only one fundamental issue is that we are not doing enough to get enough skills to be able to see beyond our basics. So it means every simple African, we are still stuck in our basics, trying to get food, get all this. It means we are all in survival mode. And during COVID-19, I was no longer survival mode because I've invested enough time of at least 10 to 16 hours working each and every day with a stable family structure. And that's probably helped me to see the situation completely different as compared to the rest of Africans. So at that time, I was no longer someone who dependent. I didn't need to look for overseas to give me guidance. I believe we're in overseas because, as you said, the British, the Americans are looking for Africans to give them feedback. So I needed to be that voice that could actually give feedback to the rest of the world. That, listen, this is what we saw in Africa, this is what we have in Africa, this is how we do it. And because I had the necessary skills to be able to do that, and would I not have those skills, I would not have done anything different. But there's something very important that I wanted, I think, my fellow Africans to understand, that skills in the world does not need to be an African skill.
Yeah.
Skills can be learned anywhere. So during my training, I've learned skills in US, in Europe, and in the East. And nobody has actually said, no, I'm not going to teach you. All the doors were open. So perhaps I think as Africans, we should try to break out from our boundaries. We should get that curiosity as a children to be able to go outside the rest of the world and see what are they doing different and what can we learn from there and bring those skills and do it the African way. And I think for me, that was the best thing. So my skill for bronchoscopy was learned in Europe, but apply here, which they couldn't apply themselves. So imagine if every child could have that opportunity to bring his skills from different aspects, from China, from Europe, from America. I mean, Africa would be a better continent.
Yeah. I mean, one writer said it's unfair to try and compress your life into like a 45-minute interview. In fact, we should be thinking about different episodes of a movie. And you have already covered a lot of elements that I want to talk to, but maybe back to South Sudan. As a child, you found yourself having to run away from the country. It took you a couple of months traveling through different countries until you landed here. But that journey is filled with so many hardships, but also challenging moments. One of them is when you get lost while walking in the forest and you find yourself in Eritrea. I think in one way you describe it as you didn't want to be seen, but you not wanting to be seen actually landed you where we are right today. And you are now visible, very, very visible. So maybe you could talk a bit about, I know you have told the story so many times, it's in your book, but maybe it would be useful to talk a bit about that moment in your life when you find yourself having to run away from your own country as a child, basically, leaving your mother and your grandmother and everyone that you have known behind, and only returning to see them, I think, after 9 years.
You know, that portion that, that when I think about it, actually makes me very emotional. I become teary. As a 16-year-old, when I ran away from Kalwa, through the bush, with absolutely nothing, no water, no food, I remember I have to drink water from the potholes on the roads, which is extremely dirty. But I think for whatever reason, that time the universe, God, protected me. And of course, finding myself in Eritrea, which was an African country, you end seeing things a lot different.
Yeah.
But again, one of the things that, of course, I was locked up in Eritrea because I didn't have any documentation. Though I was an African in Africa, I still got locked up because you cross a border, which is really, really, for me, that should not be happening because we're African, we shouldn't be having borders in the first place. And that, for me, it was one of the difficult moments. And when I was released, UN wanted me to stay to go to refugee camp and to wait for 5 years and be resettled in America. And my point was 5 years, I'll be sitting in a refugee camp, ID-less, with absolutely no opportunity to go to school. And that time I only did 5 years of education. And what will mean to me means I'll become a permanent laborer in America. And I said, no, I was not going to do that. I opted to be a street child than actually going to refugee camp. And the problem is that, of course, there are a lot of other street kids. But the difference was that, most of the street kids, they seem like they arrive. For me, I was 16, yes, but I was a child that was in journey. I was going places. And I remember that one day I had befriended one of the South Sudanese guy who became my friend. And one day we got some bit of money and he beat me up. So I decided I need to find my own identity. Perhaps I should go to Kenya. And going to Kenya was a nightmare. I was humiliated by Kenya police officer, again for being foreigner, for not having documentations. I was I have to dress naked in publics and beaten up. It was horrible. Again, that happened in Africa. How African can be cruel to one another. You look at South Africa, it's the same. Africans on African, it's horrible. South Africa, it's horrible. As compared to against Europeans, people would make a lot of noises. If someone go and gun down 2-3 white people, it become a riot. But if somebody, African, gun down Africans, we accept that to be a normal thing. And there's so many things that I learned throughout my way until I came to South Africa. It was horrible, And for me, that's where I think as Africans, that's where we need to start. We need to be very vocal about our children, about our youth, about our people, the fact that we shouldn't be selective how things are done.
Yeah.
When something's evil, should be denounced as evil. We shouldn't be looking like because it's 1, 2, 3, it's okay, but because it's that is different. We should be able to care about our own people.
Yeah.
And I think we don't care about our people enough. And that's, for me, it's not only limited to South Sudan or Kenya, it's all through Africa. And it's actually very sad. And I think what I've learned throughout my reading, what had happened to me, it wasn't the first time. It's been happening for millions of years. And perhaps it's time that we need to change our attitude towards one another, because that actually what prevent us from progressing forward and actually develop the country forward, because we're always limited, because we look at each other in a narrow-minded, either because of our colored skin or because of our height or because of where we come from. And those need to fall out. Yeah.
We'll come back to why and how you ended up in South Africa. But while in the refugee camps where you were expected to wait for that long time, you have made a very interesting statement that for you, you had not yet arrived. There was still a future for you, which was written. And you also did not want to be seen as a victim. And you have made very powerful statements about the dangers of being a victim or the dangers of victimhood. Maybe it would be useful to restate that, because I think it's a powerful way of motivating others never to give up.
I think the problem with people is accepting certain conditions as being normal. And we should not be doing that, because it's not normal. So going to refugee camp, imagine staying in the camp, because you just have protection, means somebody look after you that you will not get hurt. But at the same time, you are deprived of certain necessity in life. For a young boy, which was education, the freedom, and also freedom to think differently. And for me, at that time, should I accept going to refugee camp? Means I accept being helpless. I become a helpless person who cannot do anything for myself except for you and to provide for me. And the worst thing is that when you become a victim, means you are saying that I am not in control of my own life. You are in control of my own life. And that means I cannot do anything about my situation or my circumstance, because you are in control of my own life. And I didn't want to hand control of my life to someone else. I need to be in control of my own life. And that's, for me, is the problem that as Africans, we have handed our control of our life to other peoples. And we never take steps to saying, let's be in charge of our own lives. And means being in charge of your own life does not mean that you have to be violent. No, it's about you doing something positive to improve your own life as an African. Yeah. And that's the reason why I decided the refugee camp, though I was very young that time, I didn't think that the refugee camp was going to assist me. Apart from getting food and shelter, that's all to it. But life is never about food and shelter. I have lived with hunger. I have walked for 48, 72 hours with no food. I have not died. So that means there is a life beyond food and simple necessity. You have to be more about you, about human being.
Yeah. And that mentality has not really followed you, but you have exercised it everywhere. So you arrive in South Africa, at some point you find yourself sleeping in one of the churches here in Johannesburg. And the only thing that you ask them for is just to give you space for you to sleep, enough for you to get a job and take care of yourself. And at some point, one of the bishops comes to your help, and that changed your life according to your book. And that's where I think there's a dovetailing now with what we are doing here in terms of philanthropy, and how in our journeys we help others, but we are also helped by others. I'm very much interested in the story of you ending up in the church. And it sounded as if there was a bit of a struggle around the church wanting to take care of you. That was my reading. I might be reading it wrongly, but it sounded as if the church was struggling to take care of you.
I think when I arrived at the church, which was a cathedral, the Christ of King, and I needed actually to get contact with Comboni missionaries, and they were quite very helpful, and they got me in contact with the Comboni missionaries, which I made phone call, and unfortunately they said there was no space for me, they can't help me. And then cathedral, they said they couldn't help me. So I went away, and I went to look for help, and 2 nights prior, I slept under the flying bricks, the Coca-Cola buildings. And it was horrible because there were a lot of street kids fighting over something or nothing at all, and it was dangerous. So at 5 o'clock, I come back and I say, you know what, if they can't help me, if nobody can help me, At least what they could do is to allow me to sleep inside the church, and I would not cause trouble until I could find something for myself. And of course, the priest did feel sorry for me, but I think because his superiors think I don't think that I was the only person refugee who were knocking at their doors. Perhaps there are a lot of other people, and they're afraid that there will be, sooner or later, the church will be overwhelmed with a number of refugees. And I say, you know what, I really need help. And I was very young. And then that's when I make the second call. They allowed me to call the community missioners again. And that time, the community missioner come to my rescue. But what it's basically saying in life, sometimes we're going to get no's in our lives.
Yeah.
But never give up. You keep on trying.
Yeah.
Because there's always somebody who's going to be opposite the rules.
Yeah.
So you must keep on trying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't want to be dependent on anyone because I needed what I asked them. I needed time, a day or two, so that I could go and look for a job and then be able to provide myself. Though I was turning 18 years old, I feel like if I were given a job, I could be able to do a good job and I should be able to look after myself. I was not looking for handouts.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking that they're entitled to help me. I just needed that safety to have to sleep tonight, because one of the rules in life, before you become somebody, stay alive.
Yeah.
So I needed to stay alive that time.
Yeah. So sleeping under that Coca-Cola building it was a horrible thing, but I think it was also a deja vu moment for you, because when you were in Kenya, I think you saw a bottle of Coca-Cola, and it was made in South Africa, and you decided, I have to go to South Africa. It's not like you had planned to go to South Africa from the time you were running, but it was that bottle of Coca-Cola that you saw. And here you are sleeping under the same building with the same label that you had seen. That's how ironic life is in many ways.
What I learned in life is that actually there are a lot of signs out there.
Yeah.
And it means different things to different people. But I think most of the time we ignore them. So when just a point of correction, I was with my uncle's house when he said I should go to refugee camp. And that time I decided, no, I was not going to refugee camp because I was hoping that my uncle can allow me to go to school like his own children. And he couldn't allow me to because he didn't really need to look after me because I'm not one of his children anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that time I was young, I was angry because I thought he was relative. He should be having my best interest in heart. And unfortunately, he didn't have that. And I remember the day before, that's when I had Coca-Cola bottle and I always liked reading, and I saw Made in South Africa. Out of anger, I made that decision that I was going to go to South Africa. Yeah. But there are very few important points there. When I was saying I was going to South Africa, I never thought of the distance. I never thought of the roads. I never thought of the dangers. I never thought of the fears. Imagine if I could put the fears ahead of everything, I would not have taken the journey. Because everything that I could have been afraid of could have turned real.
Yeah.
But in that time, I just needed to take the first step and see how things goes. And the first step is that probably every human being, every African, needs to start taking steps instead of complaining. Because when you take 1-2 steps, you're no longer in the same position. You find yourself in different locations with different circumstances.
Yeah. And maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but you have said somewhere that at times you are able to take decisions because there's no one to actually advise you otherwise. And some of the decisions that you have taken is because you were alone and you had to take them. No one is saying, don't do this because you are going to encounter this problem or you are going to fall by the side. But because you are on your own, you are able to actually take those decisions. And so for me, the importance of that is really to say we must believe in ourselves and be passionate about what we are doing. And if you believe in what you want to do, you are actually going to see it through. And I think you are a testimony of that. So from the church, you then find yourself also in another predicament of some sort, where I think the help that you had received, I think the bishop travels or goes away from the country, and you are supposed to go back to, I think, repeat matric, but you didn't have scholarship. But you also found yourself in a school where there were almost all sorts of barriers for you. But there you were, and you ended up studying. A few weeks back, or is it last year, you then were given an award by the same school?
I think that was in 1998 when I actually finished my matric at one of the really predominantly township schools. And I obtained a marks of 57%, and I couldn't get into university. I came to West University, I was rejected. So I thought, okay, I couldn't, because they couldn't allow me to do medicine. In my heart, I thought I was a doctor. I could become a better doctor. And I needed, but they couldn't allow me because my marks was very low. And that time, I was 20 years old. And currently, every child that finished matric is 18 years old. So I was 2 years their senior. And they only take people that are 15 to 16 years old. And I was, obviously, the school was white in 1998. And there was really, I didn't have the money, neither the documentation to allow me to go to that school. So I remember that all the odds were against me. And when I went to school, the first thing I saw was say, no, I don't belong here. I need to go to black school where I could fit in. So I went to Kensington High School. And I remember I met a Indian headmaster who told me that my children in this school are getting exactly the same marks. And he said, no, you go to technical college and find something. You'll be able to study something. So I said, no, I don't want to study something. Yes, I know I'm poor. Yes, I know I have no home. Yes, I know that I have nothing. I'm in survival mode. But still, my dignity will not allow me to give up. So I decided I'm going to go back to JPI school and face the headmaster. When I went, the teacher told me that because of 1, 2, 3, we're not going to allow you to go in. And I looked him in the eye saying, I want to see the headmaster. Then he was sarcastic and saying, no, perhaps you must see the deputy headmaster. The headmaster was busy. And I went to deputy headmaster. And the first thing was a short guy with a beard, good looking. And I just show him my marks. And I say, I want to repeat matric. That's all I say. I never even introduced myself. And he took my marks, looked at it, and then he just kept quiet. And there was a silence in the room. I was waiting to hear to say, go away, we can't help you. And he couldn't make a decisions. Whatever is his mind, he just decided, you know what, come, we'll allow you. And 20 years down the line, I asked him, what actually drove him to make that decision? Because it was against the odds. And one thing I could notice that, one, he didn't tell the headmaster. And the second, something just slipped in his tongue. He didn't have control of what he was saying. So sometimes in life, opportunity will happen when we do the right things, when we never give up. You need to be doing your path to the best of your ability. And the rest is up to universe, God, whoever it is. And at that moment, I didn't have control of my destiny, but I knew that I needed to focus. I needed to do medicine because I believe my ability lie in medicine. And that door was open at JPI School for Boy, a school that actually I was not supposed to be there. Yeah. The doors that were absolutely closed, but I was managed to open it. I just looked through the keyhole and the doors open.
And your belief in education is so strong that you actually link it back to your upbringing and your mother. The fact that your mother did not have maybe all the opportunities in the world to take you to good schools has driven you to believe so much in education that you have even gone ahead and set up your own foundation, whose mission is to make sure that girls and boys actually go to school. I wanted us to talk a bit about the influence that your mother has had on your journey, including the idea of setting up this foundation and focusing it on education and any other areas of focus that are related to the foundation.
Yeah, look, I always say this. The difference between Europe, China, America, and Africa is never about our color of skins. It's never because we are Africans. It's all related to the level of education and skills. And I'm a testimony to that. Should I not have gotten an education, I will never be here today. So I have no illusions that if every child, African child, given education from young age, we can transform this continent from his current existence to first world continent. I have no delusions about that. And it's a factual. But the quality of education matters. The early childhood education is important. And that's what I believe in. And because of the opportunity that I got throughout my life, in South Sudan, my mother, though she was a single mother, she was able to enroll me to Catholic school That's when I completed 5 years of school, which was a very strong background for my education. And then after that, I never did any education until I came to South Africa. And that made difference in my life. So I needed to give something back to the children of South Sudan and Africa at large. And that giving back is all through mindset development, through education. So through education, I know that we can change the continent in the direction where we're going to go. And for me, that's very fundamental. And women play a critical role in our development. And now today, if you educate a woman, you educate the rest of the next high generations, as compared to education. Because in the past, all the education be focused on the male figure. But I think at this moment, most countries in the world that have a strong economy, because they have a strong, powerful women that can make a proper decisions, not based on their husband, but based on their education background, and then also, of course, the future of their own children. So that's when my foundation was born. And currently, we're having about 7 children. One is at university doing medicine, and we're having the second, which we partly sponsor, is at Cape Town doing actuary. And then we're having about 5 children that are doing grade 7 up to grade 10. Because in South Africa, the biggest thing with a black child is never the university school fees. It's actually getting the marks to allow them to actually stay in university and become something. Because the schooling system failing them. And that's the reality. So we look at the upcoming bright children and we take them and put them to proper kind of boarding school or day school where we think that can be able to bring the best potential out of them, hoping that when they finish high school, they can get scholarship and carry on with their studies. And that's the change that I want, because I think you need to focus on those that can one day bring the change, using my life story, but also become a mentor to them and become a father figure, so that tomorrow, I don't want to be sitting in my bed when I'm 80, hoping I could have done something different. And the problems about in Africa is that we always think that if we have R1 million, then we start making difference in other people's lives. But sometimes all you need is 10 rand, or just that hug, or that sitting with that child saying, it's important how you should approach your school, and how important can you actually focus on your education.
Yeah, and I mean, before we started the episode, we were talking about the school that you want to build in South Sudan, as an extension, I suppose, of the work that you are doing here. I know it's not yet, the plans and everything is not yet fully implemented, but that's something that might be of interest, not just to us here at CAPSI, but to the listeners as well. In terms of, because I think the idea here is to develop other Dr. Tabans, so that at the age of 80, you stop running.
Hoping so.
So that you stop running and others pick up the baton and do the rest. What are your plans in terms of the foundation and this extension beyond South Africa to South Sudan and other African countries? Because like we've been talking here, Africa is one big continent. We are the same people, but we are divided by different things, really, that shouldn't be barriers to our development. And so your foundation, in many ways, I see it as Pan-African in orientation.
I think that's one of the things that I always like about COVID-19. It started in China and it's spread to the rest of the world. So I believe it's time that a great concept must be born in Africa to spread to the rest of the Africa. So I have a strong belief in education. That's the key that can change the way we relate to each other as Africans. Because our conversation today, as Africans here, is to do with our level of education. So I thought in South Sudan, South Sudan is a country that's been engulfed in senseless war based on the tribes. And I thought the best way, what if there's a proper boarding school where you could actually have all the people of different tribes to study together like in the past, and growing together and become something in their life. But of course, the school will be based strongly on the skills development. And that's when the concept was born through my foundation. So yes, with the school, we started completely. The architecture drawing is almost completed. In the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be reaching the model and the architecture drawing. And by November, we're going to start agriculture first. We start agriculture because you can't bring through people to build a school if we have no food for them. So we're going to start first agriculture, which will start in November, and then the brickworks will go hand to hand. Then hopefully by next year, June, we start building the school, hoping that by 2024, the schools should be running. And I wanted the schools to be built by Africans using African skills. Because at this moment, when you take an African child, in terms of skills and productivity, it's extremely very inferior to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Because we can't do everything. We can't do anything for ourselves. You're just sitting there hoping to be waiting for handouts. And I just feel like there's more about Africans. I'm an African. I can do a lot of great things because somebody has given me opportunity to get the skills to become something in my life. And I think if every young African child is given opportunity and the skills, we can change the continent. And hence that school we're going to build it based on that concept. And yes, I think I would be going in the next 4 weeks and then try to set up the program. And of course, I think you guys can hear about it. But definitely, yes, I'm very determined. And remember in life, you never build a school complete. You start with the idea.
Yeah.
So the idea was planted, and I have moved to the next levels with architecture drawing, which is almost done. The next thing is to making the bricks, and one step at a time. And I think the more step you take, you're never in the same position.
Yeah.
And I believe the school will be complete before 2025.
Yeah. I digress a bit here. I realize you have never stopped upskilling yourself. Even at the height of COVID, I see you were studying in Europe. And what keeps you going like this?
It's a reason why I'm doing that. I remember very well that when I finished as a doctor, and I was excited, I was thrilled, because I have the degree as a doctor, until I started doing my internship. When I did my internship, there was the link between my degree and the work was a huge gap. I needed to learn a lot because I didn't learn how to put a drip. I didn't know how to do resuscitation. I didn't know how to intubate a patient. I didn't know how to cut anybody. I didn't know how to do diagnosis. So I needed to upskill myself. And I think that was the bigger difference in my life, was to upskill myself. And most of the people, they never look at life like that, because when they get this degree, they say, wow, I'm now a doctorate, I got PhD. But when you give them work, they can't do the work.
Yeah.
And that's been the sad reality. So that's when I decided, you know what? And I remember I was at Calafong, and most of the consultants were whites. Sometimes they're not reluctant to share their knowledge, because there's that cultural difference, because the way you guys talk. And sometimes because of what had happened in the past. So there's not that relations. And I found that I couldn't learn. So the only way for me to learn is to step out of the boundaries. So when I was at Vets, I couldn't get all that I want to get. So then I went to Netherlands. But also put in mind that in Netherlands, there are white people. In South Africa, there are white people.
Yeah.
But the question that your relations is different. You go where the doors are open. Now, if the door is closed here and they can't allow it in, there's another one open. Please move to the next one.
Yeah.
Don't hate this one. Don't break this one down. It's not going to help you. So that's what actually empowered me. And of course, when I did the training for bronchoscopies, I never did it for COVID-19. I did it because I want to perform them and save lives of my patients.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be something that became a big factor in my life.
Yeah.
So today, I urge you all the young Africans who have just finished degrees, please, a degree is just a stepping stone. You have not arrived. You still need to spend day in and day out of skilling yourself. Once you have those skills, and those skills are not determined by saying, listen, I've been to Amsterdam, I can do 1, 2, 3. No, your surroundings, your fears, your colleagues will tell you that you're good. It's not you to say you're good enough.
Yeah.
If you have nothing to show for it. Your skill must show to the rest of the continent that you can do something different.
Yeah.
And I think for me, Africans need to start celebrating degrees and PhDs. We need to celebrate our roads, our buildings, our innovation, things that are developed in Africa. And then when we can do that, then we know that we made it. But if you have none of the above, then I'm sorry, because the degree is just a piece of paper.
Yeah, and I think you made a statement somewhere that the reason why you are also doing this is to make sure that you are not indispensable. Because we also get comfortable and think that, we have arrived, like you're saying it, but then you discover that you can be dispensed with at any given point in time. But if you keep on upskilling yourself, being ahead of the curve, then it means you are always the sought after individual in terms of the sphere of work, the sphere of influence that you find yourself in. And I think that's the running that we started with. And I'm really glad, Taban, that we had an opportunity to speak to you. I think that as you progress with your journey of resilience, of bravery, of courage, you're actually encouraging a lot of young people. And I would want you to end this with maybe addressing young people in Africa and really guiding them on how they should be leading, but also developing themselves for the future, which is really unpredictable.
I think one of the things that, especially in South Africa, I've seen quite a lot of young people. They come out of university and they go to work. And you find most of the corporates in South Africa are white corporates. And most of them, they go to those corporates. After 2, 3, 4 months, they leave because they think the place is too racist. And what I want to tell these young people, when you go to that environment, when you pass that interview, I want to remind you, they already know your color, how you look like. They know you're Africans, and they know you have a degree. But what they don't know is what you can do. And it's very important that when you join those corporates, focus on your skills. Make sure that your performance is based on what you know. And if you don't know, try to learn as much as you can. And if you have a good skills, you will nobody will have issues with you. Because the moment that your skills are top levels, you become indispensable. And the race does not even play a factor. Because I'm a testimony for that. I'm running a practice midstream, which is 80% whites. And all of them, they Google me, they see me being black as I am, they still come shivering to my office because they want to see me, because they see something that I can do as compared to others. There are a lot of other white doctors, but they will come to me. So if the world is racism the way we think, then why should these people see me? Yeah. So perhaps I think everybody must run their own journey, and they must focus on being the best in what they do. Rather blame the environment, the universe, the nature for all their problems. It's just take a mindset of change. Let's not be victims, because if you go to workplace with the perceptions that the place is too racist, people are racist there, everybody's against you, I promise you, you're going to start seeing them endlessly, and you will never progress. And once you become a victim, I always say the nice thing about being a victim is like locking yourself in the room, throwing the key in the toilet, and crying for help because you can't open the door anymore. And don't do that for yourself. Focus on your ability and your skills, and respect time. We have not have enough time. That's the reason why I'm running. Please start running your own race and make sure that your time is running short. We need to get Africa out of current problems. We need to give the coming generation a better start, not the way we got. And that's all I will say. For the rest of Africa, I want to tell you guys, there's no need to cross the sea to Europe, because there's nothing in Europe. Europeans are coming to Africa to take our resources. And the reason that the resources we have in Africa, we don't see them. Because we have no skills, we have not done our basics, we can't utilize them. So they need to change that mentality. You need to get the skills wherever you get them and come back to Africa. Let's develop them, because wealth is in Africa. Not in China, not in Europe, not in Africa, not in America, but in Africa only.
Taban, thank you so much. We invited you here because of our Kisima initiative. Kisima is that well where you always go to when you are thirsty and you want to drink and quench your thirst. And I think you are a perfect story for Kisima in many ways, because of your resilience, but also because of your beautiful heart that I think everyone just sees. but also in terms of just showing people how resilient you are and how, if you are resilient, you can actually get to live your dreams. So thank you very much. We here at CAPSI and the Vest Business School are thrilled to have you, and we want to find ways in which we should, where we could collaborate with your initiative, especially the foundation that you have just established. Part of what we do as CAPSI is to work with philanthropic institutions, assist them in either developing their strategies or even in terms of assisting with resource mobilization strategies. But before I go, you strike me as somebody whose philanthropy will be along these lines. I just don't want to receive. I want to make sure that I also play an active part in it. And I think that for me is one of the most important messages in all of this, which is that we should not see philanthropy only as us receiving, but us playing active roles in it. And I think that's the narrative that we at CAPSI want to promote. Thank you so much, Taban.
Thank you. Just quickly, I would say that if you're going to help my foundation, don't give me money. If I need a brick machine, help me with a brick machine.
Yeah.
Because money, it does not help you to do anything. It's a root of evil. But you wanted people to do things themselves. Africa have enough resources and must just stick to that.
You have all heard Dr. Taban. He is still running. He is still very courageous. He is still very resilient. And he's still learning. He's still upskilling himself. He has set up the foundation, and you've heard how you'd want to be supported. Thank you for watching this episode. See you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, talking all things philanthropy.